It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Think climate engineering has nothing to do with Wall Street? Think again. Those who print the money control it all. For the moment. From Bloomberg.com, Wall Street will regret helping the world burn. For an industry in the business of money, why is Wall Street ensuring its own destruction? Yes, the entire ship is going down, and it seems almost none, even at this late hour, have a clue. From weather warfare to warfare in general to industrialized, militarized, so-called society that was only able to exist temporarily from extremely destructive, extractive resource everything. The damage is done. Can it continue? No. Breaking headlines addressing climate engineering shortly, but let's start with weather warfare. Specifically, in this case, patented processes of chemical ice nucleation climate engineering operations. From the New York Times, tornadoes and hail as large as softballs forecast in Texas. It's already happened. From MSN, this, severe storms bring, quote, monster hail to parts of Texas. And from Fox Weather, storm chaser vehicles damaged by significant hail. Question, is the now constant extreme hail, baseball and softball sized at times, in any way historically precedented? No. Is this extreme massive hail and constant hail everywhere there's moisture, it seems, of late, in any way normal or natural from a historical perspective? No. Have past hail storm samples and freak flash snowstorm samples tested by Geoengineeringwatch.org contain climate engineering chemical ice nucleating elements? Yes. If you want to see the extreme example of chemical ice nucleation, what it can do on a surface of water, search Lake Michigan ice balls. Better yet, search the Engineering Winter section on the homepage of Geoengineeringwatch.org. But some would ask, why would the climate engineers need to, or even want to, chemically nucleate cloud moisture? The answer to that question is complex. None of the weather terrorist motives are benevolent. None. But a core component is to continue sowing confusion and division in the population in regard to the true severity of damage already inflicted to the climate system, much of it from climate engineering operations in the first place, but by no means the only cause. But by creating a cold, dense layer of atmospheric air that sinks to Earth's surface, again, often accompanied by baseball and softball size hail, the flash chemical cool down can then be sensationalized by matrix media as proof of cold, in spite of the now constant record-shattering high temperatures that are escalating at blinding speed all over the world. Again, search the Engineering Winter section on the homepage of Geoengineeringwatch.org to learn more. Moving on, in regard to the polar regions, and I do talk about those regions a lot because they are the air conditioners of the planet. They're already broken and they're about to become a lot more broken if we have blue ocean events at one or both poles. That means the loss of summer ice. That means the planet's energy balance spirals exponentially further in the wrong direction, different planet. But there's much more. Scientists continue to blame unfolding meltdown in the polar regions for scheduled coming pathogen releases. Never mind the hundreds of biolabs around the world that are and have long since been engineering God knows what for an increasingly desperate and dangerous controller class and their efforts to suppress everyone else. On that thought, let's add this. New from SciTechDaily.com. Melting Arctic ice may unleash ancient deadly diseases. Ongoing narrative. This is a new headline. Scientists warn. Yes, just blame the melting ice. Again, never mind the hundreds of biolabs and constantly sprayed chemical skies. The SciTech Daily Report continues with this. Climate change is opening new pathways for the spread of infectious diseases, according to a broad international team of scientists. The researchers published their findings in the journal Science. Yes, the consensus of an international team of so-called scientists, the global controller-owned kind. There's more. The authors recommend actions to, quote, enhance awareness and management of existing and emerging zoonosis with epidemic and pandemic potential. Zoonotic pathogens with the ability to jump from wildlife to humans. That's what they're referring to. Question, does it seem as though the authors already know what's coming? Perhaps it's because they do. They continue. Permafrost thawing could even release ancient bacteria or viruses that have been frozen for thousands of years. This narrative has been ongoing. They're continuing to push it harder than ever. Again, never mind the hundreds of biolabs all over the world. It's just the melting ice, or so they want you to believe. The power structure scientists then state the pathogens may be parasitic, viral, or bacterial. They can include, they say, unconventional agents with the ability to spread to humans through different means like water, food, or the environment. A question, is this the sequel to the Wuhan bat virus? You decide. More from the report. The Earth's warming is behind the permafrost thaw. Wow, what incredible science genius. I would have never imagined that warmth melts permafrost. Who would have thought that? It's a good thing we have such dedicated intellectual giant scientists to explain to us that heat melts ice. Final excerpts from the report. Final warnings of what is scheduled. The authors reaffirm the need to, quote, enhance awareness and manage Arctic zoonosis with pandemic potential, end quote. The authors see their comprehensive review as a warning for governments and communities to take action early before outbreaks occur. Let's read between the lines. Does that last statement give the distinct impression that another chapter of, quote, safe and effective medical treatments are soon to be inflicted, or should I say injected? And of course, there's the other power structure option, the one turning our once blue skies to a dirty, white, sun-blocking filth on so many days, or often at best a silvery white sky. This is the threat that there is absolutely no place to hide from. Precipitation samples have long since repeatedly revealed biological carrier elements like polymer fibers and graphene mixed into the plethora of other highly toxic metals that are named on climate engineering patents, by the way, and again showing up in our rain. It's up to all of us to connect the dots and take appropriate action to sound the alarm before the sand in the hourglass runs out. Consider and remember that populations around the globe aren't just expendable to those in power, they're a rapidly increasing liability, and this is especially true for the U.S. population, many of whom are armed. And let's not forget the 2.4 million rounds of 40 caliber hollow point bullets purchased by U.S. agencies like, quote, Homeland Security in 2012. Is that their plan B or C? We'll soon find out. For over a decade and a half, I and Geoengineeringwatch.org have desperately tried to warn about the coming power structure total desperation as global ecological collapse unfolded and accelerated. That time is now. The planet's collapsing climate and life support systems have beat the global controllers to the proverbial intersection. It's now going exponential. Before the power brokers were fully prepared for this current trajectory inevitability. Three primary factors I and Geoengineering Watch warned about as this chapter unfolded, biosphere collapse. Those factors are false flag events, global conflict, and pathogen releases, not necessarily in that order. With all that in mind, let's add this from NPR. Homeland Security radio ads prompting the public to prepare for terrorist attacks. Imagine that. We're always warned before they trigger something, aren't they? What's planned now? Here's a footnote. Why are there now so many TV and radio commercials prompting the public to learn CPR so that they can help with those that are going into cardiac arrest, which, again, now is apparently common? Why? Safe and effective? Is that why? Is that connected to all the cardiac arrest we see occurring now? Elite athletes at the top of their careers dropping dead on sports fields? Next, the controller-orchestrated smoke and mirror tactics are being ramped up. From the UK Guardian, UK scientists to launch outdoor geoengineering experiments. The report says blocking sunlight could temporarily slow the climate crisis, But the technologies remain, they say, highly controversial. Advanced Research and Intervention Agency, that's acronym ARIA, A-R-I-A. Geoengineering proposals aim to block sunlight reaching the Earth's surface. For example, they say by launching clouds of reflective particles into the atmosphere, or they say using seawater sprays to make clouds brighter. Forget the seawater part. That's not being done. I'll get to that in a moment. Bear with me. However, the report states solar radiation management, SRM, could have serious unintended consequences. They end with this: there is no international agreement between countries to govern any major geoengineering scheme, and experts have called for a moratorium on deployment. Moratorium, smoke and mirrors. We've seen that for many, many years, starting in 2010 at the International Biodiversity Conference when they passed a moratorium on geoengineering, which meant absolutely zero. Just to convince people, oh, good, we can mark that off our list, nothing to worry about now, while these programs are ramped up to ever higher levels. And about the intergovernmental cooperation, that's been in place for decades. Go to the documents section of geoengineeringwatch.org, search Massive Senate Document, that title, and you can find an 800-page U.S. Senate document that specifically outlines the intergovernmental cooperation between, quote, otherwise adversarial nations, because you can't just climate engineer over your own country. There are mountains and mountains of film footage, photographs of these retrofit nozzles on aircraft, wing pylons aimed into the exhaust jet streams. Again, documents confirming this cooperation, budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars then, Soviet weather modification geoengineering scientists touring the U.S. during the height of the Cold War, U.S. scientists touring their country during the height of the Cold War. There is no rational denial of the size, scope, and scale of this climate engineering Manhattan project that's raging in our skies. So, summary on this UK Guardian article. First, forget the totally false diversion of the weather terrorists using seawater, as I stated. That's total diversion. An endless list of precipitation tests from all over the world prove dispersions are a plethora of toxic climate engineering elements, including heavy metals and polymers. Next, quote, launching clouds of reflective particles into the atmosphere, end quote. Yes, exactly. Our now never true blue skies are constantly being covered over by the climate engineering sprayed filth, dispersions. And no, it isn't, quote, just jet exhaust. If you have that pathetic and verifiably absurd just jet exhaust disinformation thrown at you, you will then know that you are dealing with an individual or a source that is either clueless or motivated to lie. Take your pick. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report, the end of the world as we know it broadcast. Brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of global climate engineering operations, aka weather, chemical, and biological warfare. Reaching a critical mass of awareness is the only way forward in this fight. We can and we absolutely must reach a critical mass of awareness by starting a conversation on climate engineering that leads people to a credible source of data. Credibility is key. Propagating data that is not credible compromises our cause. It moves the fight backward, not forward. Geoengineeringwatch.org will continue all of our efforts to be the go-to source on covert climate engineering operations. A conversation on climate engineering can easily be started with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials available on our homepage. We pass on our extremely effective, very high-quality, full-color printed materials for less than our cost of producing and shipping. Please help us to sound the alarm. Moving on, yet more smoke and mirrors to cover the tracks of the ongoing climate engineering atrocities. From the UK Daily Mail, this report, experiments to dim the sun in bid to curb global warming will be approved by the UK government within weeks. Let's stop and think about this first. The very premise of solar radiation management, the foundation on which this insanity has been pushed on populations, is completely flawed. The most recent science studies prove that filling the atmosphere with sun-blocking particles only provides very temporary and toxic cooling, followed by an even worse warming. So this is in a span of less than 2 years based on the recent science studies. So what happens after over 75 years of this insanity in our skies, which, by the way, isn't benevolent at all? This is power control, malevolent weather warfare, and used also to confuse and divide the population as to the true state of damage already done to the climate with the chemical cooldowns. But the overall warming to the planet made worse by climate engineering operations, not better. And still they pretend that they might deploy this last-ditch silver bullet to mitigate us from an incinerating planet. It's only fueling the fire. The report states, basking in the sunshine could soon be a thing of the past. For the record, it already is. If you can manage to find some mostly unobstructed sunlight, the now decimated ozone layer, thanks to climate engineering, will fry you with off-the-charts UVB and UVC DNA-damaging radiation. So back to the report. About the basking in the sunshine being a thing of the past part. The report states, quote, that's because it has emerged that experts are planning on dimming the sun in a bid to curb global warming by injecting aerosols into the atmosphere or brightening clouds with the same process to reflect sunshine. Really? The quote experts might spray sun-blocking particles into our skies someday. Welcome to the planetary asylum. How many willing to go along with this narrative because they don't want to disrupt their delusional paradigm of the future they imagined? And how does that help? Anything. How do they look at their posterity while turning two blind eyes to what's taking place in our skies? I don't understand it. I couldn't look my children in the eyes if I had ignored this. My life has been 100% on this cause from the moment I became aware of this issue. I can't do otherwise. And this is not an issue I wanted to engage in for the rest of my life. But this is the biggest hole in the bottom of the boat, the hole that if we don't plug and stop, the entire ship goes down and no other causes or concerns matter. Nothing. We have to stop what's happening in our skies or we're done. It's that simple. More from the Daily Mail report. Critics have voiced worries that geoengineering endeavors could backfire and even make the climate change situation worse by triggering destructive weather patterns. Then they add this. Experts have previously warned that technique is a, quote, risky strategy that could wreak havoc on our weather patterns, triggering severe droughts or devastating cyclones. Let's stop there. Not, quote, could backfire. Long since has. But in many ways, that's all a part of the plan for the controllers, isn't it? Crop crushing, civilization devastating, weather warfare, everything. Total contamination of the planet, soils, water, food, and every breath we take. Decimation of the ozone layer, and no, it isn't getting better. Another big lie. This single factor alone, ozone destruction, is an extremely near-term existential threat all by itself. And again, every breath we take, toxic. Ponder that for a bit. And then, of course, there's the 442 nuclear power plants that are now much more susceptible to a meltdown if there's a large CME or solar flare, because our now compromised atmosphere, because of climate engineering, can no longer protect us. How about that little bit in the equation? So for those that want to continue pretending that climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare, are just dangerous proposals that might be a problem someday, please wake up. Someday has already come and gone. Now we're collectively circling the drain. In the effort to tie a few puzzle pieces together, here's a quick follow-up report on premeditated pollution and mass distraction from the White House. This headline from Inside Climate News: as EPA rolls back regulations for large industrial polluters, it finds a new target: two-person geoengineering startup. This is Make Sunsets, went over this last week. This is mind-numbing distraction that they're going to, quote, fight climate engineering by focusing on two clowns from Silicon Valley that launched a few balloons, a little over 100 balloons to be exact, and mathematically it would take, because each balloon carries less than 10 grams of SO2, it would take 10 million balloons, 10 million, to equal the payload in a single jet tanker like a KC-135. And there are hundreds of thousands of tanker flights for geoengineering a year globally. And they're focusing on two clowns that launched a few balloons. The report says, meanwhile, Lee Zeldin that's the head of the EPA, introduced what he called the largest deregulatory announcement in U.S. history, end quote. The EPA released 31 separate actions to roll back restrictions on air and water pollution. Think about that. While he's pretending to fight climate engineering to protect our health, two clowns launching 146 or 7 balloons, ignoring the hundreds of thousands of geoengineering jet tanker flights annually that are dispersing something in the range of 40 to 60 million tons of highly toxic nanoparticle pollution in our skies annually, and what else we don't even know. And at the same time, he's gutting atmospheric pollution regulations and water pollution regulations. Think about that. You think these people are here to help you? Really? Think again. And it's not just this administration. It's every administration. They're just two sides of the same coin, all dangling on the end of strings by those who print the money. That's who's in control of all of it. On the subject of scheduled wildfires, first, a new report on a former firestorm catastrophe from phys.org, and it fits into everything I've just covered. Canadian wildfire smoke cooled New York by 3 degrees C and trapped air toxicants, researchers find. How effective for the controllers, accomplishing two objectives at once: temporary surface cooling that's sensationalized by matrix media, masking the true meltdown on the planet, while poisoning populations. An ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure dome, forcing the smoke down on the surface and holding it there for days and days and days. If you want to learn more, search engineering wildfires on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. You won't like what you learn. From AccuWeather, wildfire season in U.S. could, quote, rapidly escalate amid building heat and drought. From that report, fires could burn more than 7 million acres in 2025 as the United States faces a volatile year for wildfires, including areas devastated by Hurricane Helene last September. They continue. AccuWeather long-range forecasters say between 7 and 9 million acres will burn. They don't say might, could, maybe. They say will burn across the United States. Additionally, 60,000 to 75,000 fires are predicted to ignite, including 7,500 to 9,000 in California alone, setting their crosshairs on us here in the formerly Golden State. They then say, while the season may start slowly, there is a strong potential for rapid escalation as drought conditions and heat set in. That's according to AccuWeather senior meteorologist Paul Pastelok. Mentioned his name before. Paul should get a link to the dimming, shouldn't he? And asked to explain it with about 100 Aware and Awake activists openly CC'd so that he knows many are listening to the conversation. They then say the shifting weather conditions from spring to summer will prime the environment for a surge in wildfire activity, especially across the Northwest and Northern Rockies. And they know, don't they? Just like Lahaina, that was declared officially a flash drought zone right before it was incinerated. Just like the Palisades that had not had rain for nearly a year. This is exactly the kind of preparation that's outlined in the U.S. military document located by geoengineeringwatch.org and posted on our site titled Wildfires as a Military Weapon, with targets or study zones within the borders of the U.S. Why? Why would a U.S. military document calling for forest fires as a military weapon, which is insane enough, outline sites within the borders of the U.S.? And now they're telling us, the AccuWeather script-reading so-called meteorologists, and they are literally reading a script, by the way, that's passed down through the illegally gag-ordered National Weather Service and National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, all the way down to local meteorologists, a script that's produced by Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, private defense contractors that are neck-deep in climate engineering patents and operations. They're reading a script, and they're telling us what's coming. They end with this: as summer progresses, repeated rounds of monsoon rains and elevated humidity should help suppress wildfire development, particularly in Arizona, western New Mexico, and southern Utah. To be clear for the record, the climate engineers decide where it will rain and where it won't. They decide how toxic that rain will be. They decide. The report then says the fast-building fire conditions are expected to focus on areas east of the Cascades through the northern Rockies. This is the schedule of what's coming, and it will likely be worse than this, because what's unfolding is in the exponential phase of the equation. We are in completely uncharted territory. Climate engineers further fueling this cascading collapse of everything everywhere all at once. From Fox Weather, this breaking report: thousands evacuate as New Jersey wildfire explodes in size, closes part of Garden State Parkway. Just examples. There are countless more ongoing firestorms around the world. In fact, the climate catastrophe chaos around the world is mind-numbing. Americans know nothing about what's taking place in so many parts of the world while they're watching scripted political theater and every single imaginable socially divisive issue that's pumped out by matrix media to polarize, divide, and distract populations while the planet implodes. From ProPublica.org, Earth Justice President describes a fundamentally different era of hostility toward environmentalists. That report states the increase of lawsuits targeting green groups as just one of the growing threats to environmental advocacy organizations and the people who staff them. For the record, I have no love for these people. The environmental community continues to deny the climate engineering elephant in the sky. Their denial is criminal hypocrisy, nothing less. And Geoengineering attorneys were told by all the attorneys from all the major environmental organizations they won't address climate engineering because they don't want to lose their 501c3 nonprofit. Again, criminal hypocrisy. On the other side of the divide, there are many, and more all the time, individuals and alternative media platforms alike who openly acknowledge the climate engineering atrocities that are so clearly raging in our now constantly tainted skies, but who adamantly deny the countless other forms of anthropogenic damage to the planet. It would take hours to even begin to do justice for that subject. The human race has laid waste to our formerly thriving planet in the geologic blink of an eye, drilling, pumping, and incinerating over 100 million barrels of hydrocarbon fuel every single day is extremely destructive for the planet and the atmosphere. Digging up, shipping, and burning over 26 million tons of coal every single day, the same. Unimaginably destructive, a massive blow to the planet's web of life and former atmospheric thermal equilibrium, thermal energy balance, now obliterated. Atmosphere's warning, planet overall warming at the thermal energy equivalent of 13 Hiroshima bombs per second. Please don't believe me. Please research everything I state on this broadcast, everything. And don't roll your eyes and walk away because of what you heard somewhere without investigating. Please actually do objective investigation. That's all I'm asking. There's also the paving of the planet, the cutting down and burning of the forest, the poisoning of our soils and waters. How can anyone rationally believe that such destruction has no effect? Yes, toxic climate engineering weather warfare operations are the single most destructive human activity of all. But the combined total of the rest is equally horrific. When I hear individuals and platforms ranting that the planet isn't warming, that it's all a, quote, hoax, and that even more carbon in the atmosphere would be better, they say, it's hard to find words to adequately respond to such falsehoods. On what logic, or lack of it, are such conclusions based? Such sources, for example, claim the trees and crops are suffering because there's not enough carbon in the atmosphere. Really? They further claim we need to drill and burn even more. Question, how's that going so far as we circle the drain toward a trajectory of planetary omnicide by the end of this decade? And that's not an opinion. That's a statistical trajectory if we remain on the current course. If those pushing for more drilling and burning aren't paid by the carbon fuel industry to disseminate their disinformation, they should be. Let's take a moment to apply simple logic to the mind-numbingly false claim that forests are dying because there isn't enough carbon in the atmosphere. Forests were thriving all over the world before the human race pumped up atmospheric carbon content by over 50%. And now, with atmospheric carbon 50% higher than when the forests were thriving, forests around the world are dying by the day. The same ecosystem collapse scenario is shockingly true for our rapidly acidifying oceans. Also, dying by the day. Our formerly thriving seas have previously absorbed the vast majority of the carbon increases, but no more. The same is true of the forests, which are now no longer acting as carbon sinks, but carbon sources as they die. Yes, of course, there are many other factors that are killing our forests and our seas, with climate engineering at the top of the list. But again, my point is this. Climate engineering is absolutely not the only thing on the list of human-caused planetary destruction. Far from it. As I've stated so many times, what we face isn't a this or that equation. It's a this and that, and countless other factors scenario. Atmospheric carbon content can be compared to water. Is it needed? Yes. Is too much change in atmospheric chemistry faster than any organism can adapt bad? Yes. Water is the most essential element of life for crops and forests. Put either under a constant foot of water and see what happens. Both will die. Are the additional feedback loops that skyrocketing atmospheric carbon counts have triggered, like mass methane hydrate and clathrate deposit releases, also bad? Worse than that. Heat-trapping methane that's being released from permafrost and seabed deposits is migrating into the atmosphere and covering the planet like a layer of glass. Heat gets in, but not out. Over a 10-year time horizon, methane is 120 times more effective at trapping heat than CO2, but yet we hear so little about it. And we certainly don't see the mass explosions of methane deposits. Search Siberian methane craters. Take a look for yourself. You have to see it to believe it. We don't see that on Matrix Media because they don't want you to know that. Question, are methane deposit releases part of the planet's immune system? Would seem somewhat logical, isn't it? Maybe the planet's had enough of the human race, and now it's going to run a fever that will exterminate the problem. Climate engineering, in the attempt to mask the now completely out of control heat imbalance on the planet from populations, while simultaneously using weather as a weapon, is further fueling the overall heating, not mitigating it, as we have been told. Bottom line. Climate engineering operations, if allowed to continue, are a mathematically certain death sentence, not just for humanity, but likely all life on Earth. The continued extraction and incineration of carbon-based fuels, the same. Again, it's a this and that equation. Here's my point. Why is it so important, critically important, to get your facts straight? It matters because credibility matters, without which the battle to expose and halt climate engineering is lost. There's a third demographic that warrants mentioning. Individuals and groups that deny both geoengineering jet spraying and the dire damage already inflicted on the planet. It would seem that there is little hope of reasoning with this degree and depth of denial. Such individuals will likely maintain their eyes wide shut, head in the sand mentality till the brutal, bitter end. If you see or hear any individual or online source claiming that it's just jet exhaust covering the entire horizon with a filthy, opaque canopy of nanoparticles, you'll know that they are either clueless or motivated to lie. Take your pick. Again, for the record, there can be no legitimate discussion of climate anything from any perspective without first and foremost acknowledging and addressing the climate engineering elephant in the equation. You're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 507, April 26th, 2025. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News is brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations known as geoengineering. Global Alert News is aired on numerous AM and FM stations around the country. If any radio station near you is willing to air the GAN broadcast in order to inform their listeners of what Matrix Media won't mention, have them contact us at admin@geoengineeringwatch.org. We'll grant them access to our weekly broadcast for free, of course. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour can be found on the homepage of Geoengineering Watch under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities. Now with 26 million views on YouTube. The best way to share is by circulating the direct link to the dimming by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of the dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment. All of that helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience about reaching those that still, even now, aren't looking up. Here's a key way forward. Start a conversation with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials. They can be found on our homepage. Our only goal, provide activists what they need to move this fight forward. Extremely high-quality printed materials, shocking images, and we pass these printed materials on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. We have Geoengineering Watch hoodies and shirts, including our new blue Geoengineering Watch shirts. Just got those. Photos are on our homepage. We have scannable business cards and bumper stickers, all of these effective tools to help strike up a conversation on the climate engineering issue, to get people to look up. Reaching a critical mass of awareness on the climate engineering onslaught is the great imperative of our time. If we can expose it, we can stop it from the inside out. We need our military brothers and sisters to stand down. We need them to realize that they are quite literally eliminating any chance of any future from themselves or their posterity or the rest of us. If you're willing to share a picture of yourself with a Geoengineering Watch t-shirt or hoodie, ideally in some crowded location, please send your photo to us so we can post it as part of our activist compilation, which is now part of our materials page. The images encourage others to make their voices heard in this all-important battle to sound the alarm. And for those that don't want to be identified as participating in this all-important cause because they're afraid they'll be singled out, understand that there is no safe place to hide on a sinking ship. Hiding in your cabin on the Titanic won't save you. Get on deck and help us to keep this ship afloat. To all those that are steadfastly committed to exposing and halting the climate engineering insanity, my deepest gratitude to you forever. Moving on, what about MAHA? Here's my answer. Unless or until the toxic atmospheric spraying assault is exposed and halted, MAHA everything means absolutely nothing. I know of no meaningful action to truthfully address the climate engineering issue from the current administration or any other. Only a constant flow of smoke and mirrors, while geoengineering operations continue to be ramped up. And the chemical ice nucleation operations, biggest ramp up we ever saw and continue to see, started January 21st of this year with blizzards in New Orleans and Florida. What a blatant example of winter weather warfare. Moving on from the New York Times, EPA set to cancel grants aimed at protecting children from toxic chemicals. That doesn't seem to fit into the whole MAHA program, does it? The cancellations set to apply to pending and active grants also affect research into forever chemicals contaminating the food supply. By the way, for those that watch my broadcast, they already know this. Not an uncontaminated drop of rain on planet Earth. Proven by peer-reviewed study, and it's not just PFAS forever chemicals, it's also climate engineering elements. And these particles are manufactured. That's based on analysis from top scientists at Rensselaer Polytechnic University in New York, and my interview exchange with one which we will soon post. Stay tuned. From Gizmodo.com, as RFK crusades to, quote, make America healthy, FDA suspends milk quality tests. Report says if your next glass of milk makes you puke, feel free to blame Kennedy. That's from the report. That's not my words. It's theirs. From Scientific American, RFK Jr. declares a U.S. ban on artificial food dyes. This week, the Secretary of Health and Human Services announced plans to remove 8 more food dyes from the U.S.'s food system. Went over this on a previous broadcast. Again, MAHA anything means nothing unless or until the toxic atmospheric spraying is exposed and halted, a task which is up to us, not them. On the subject of engineered weather whiplash, think chemical ice nucleation climate engineering operations. Again, search the engineering winter section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org to learn more. You will be astounded at the images and the data that's there. From nature.com on this subject, this new published science study titled Rapid Flips Between Warm and Cold Extremes in a Warming World. Abstract. Rapid temperature flips are sudden shifts from extreme warm to cold or vice versa. Both challenge humans and ecosystems by leaving a very short time to mitigate two contrasting extremes. But this scenario has yet to be understood, this report states. Stop and think about that. Yet another example of the so-called experts that just don't know what's happening because they just refuse to look up and acknowledge the climate engineering elephant in the sky, or to test the precipitation and find the patented elements for chemical ice nucleation. What kind of, quote, academics do we have? The eyes wide shut, power structure controlled kind. Let's add this from phys.org. From boiling hot to freezing cold, sudden flips in temperature set to increase with climate change. It's not climate change doing this. I want to make that clear. Is the climate changing? It's worse than that. What's unfolding is an abrupt climate collapse. Those that don't believe it will soon. They'll have no choice. But these sudden whiplash temperature drops are from chemical ice nucleation, period. That's what the baseball and softball size hail is from. The report states rapid temperature flips from hot to cold extremes have increased across the world, according to a new study published in Nature Communications. These flips, which may negatively impact ecosystems, there's no could, no may, no might. It's destroying ecosystems and human health, are projected to further increase under global warming in most areas of the world. By the end of the century, we'll never get that far. We won't make the end of this decade on the current course. And I don't care who believes that or not. That's not my task or in my control to make somebody believe anything. It's a statistical trajectory. Ecosystems around the world are completely collapsing. And the moment the power structure knows the population is waking up and realizing the party is over right then. They will play massive cards, and that could include the dispersing of pathogens with elements that are already in the precipitation, biological carrier platform elements like polymer fibers and graphene. They could add Ebola or Marburg and level the playing field overnight. Why do you think they wouldn't? Because they love you so much? Again, about this report's claim that it's climate change causing these flash cooldowns, that's absolute, total deception. Patented processes of chemical ice nucleation climate engineering operations are the cause of the flash surface cooldowns, the ice storms that now constantly take place between migrating flows of warm moisture, often from the record warm Gulf of Mexico, and regions that were chemically cool over winter. There's an ice storm transition zone where these chemically nucleating elements hit the surface before they set up. And despite how obviously engineered these scenarios are, the climate engineering cover-up actors at institutions like Weather Channel, Weather Nation, Weather Central, and countless other institutions for the Matrix continue to try to explain these scenarios away as if it's, quote, Mother Nature. And they use the same mantra terms on each station. It's a script. They're literally reading a script passed down to them ultimately by private defense contractors Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, both of which are neck deep in climate engineering everything, patents and operations alike. Late this week, unorganized migrating moisture from the Pacific was allowed into Northern California. The usual pre-drizzle mass spraying of our skies took place, featureless canopies of aerosol filth overhead. More geoengineering jet-sprayed dispersions could be seen laced into the toxic mess. How few even notice the flash chemical cooldowns and the science fiction skies that go with them. Welcome to the asylum. Moving on from the UK Guardian, the Trump administration is sabotaging your scientific data. From that report, burying our heads in the sand won't stop the climate crisis or pandemics. We're taking action to preserve government tools that help us understand and address these threats, the report says. They continue, data is being stolen from us, and our ability to understand the world is being stolen from us. Let's stop there. More than enough blame to go around here. First, we have the criminally complacent and outright lying climate science community that won't admit to the climate engineering elephant in the equation. And we have now the new Matrix minions in the equation that are trying to erase data sources that help us to verify and prove the climate engineering operations. Criminality on every side of this fence. From BBC, inside the desperate rush to save decades of U.S. scientific data from deletion, Same theme. Swaths of scientific data deletions are sweeping across U.S. government websites with decades of health, climate change, and extreme weather research at risk. They can just change history and make it look like climate engineering operations have forever been the norm, or the conditions they create, I should say. People have no idea what's going on. They think any government, anything is here to help them and to alter this equation. No. The cancer of control that has been establishing that control for many decades, if not centuries, doesn't just go away from an election, which they control anyway. And they have to make each election convincing, each new chapter of political theater more convincing than the last. At this time, it's different. No, it's not. No, it's not. Moving on, while parts of the U.S. continue to get the chemical cool down from the world's largest and best-funded military, not so much in other parts of the world. From CNN, extended heat wave in India and Pakistan to test survivability limits with temperatures reaching Death Valley levels. This is in spring. We're not even to summer yet. For hundreds of millions of people living in India and Pakistan, the early arrival of summer heat waves has become a terrifying reality. That's testing survivability limits and putting enormous strain on energy supplies, vital crops, and livelihoods. Collapse is here. For those that don't realize it, it's here, and it will accelerate blindingly fast from here on out. From openaccessgovernment.org, a severe drought crisis takes over Africa, with conditions worsening across the continent. A recent report by the Copernicus Global Drought Observatory shows the scale and seriousness of the crisis, which has entered its third consecutive year. Remember, the climate engineers control the spigot. Where it rains, when it rains, and how much it rains or not. What about Earth Day 2025? Question: how many Earth Day event organizers are addressing climate engineering? And if not, why not? Yes, as the proverb goes, there are none so blind as those who refuse to see. From MSN, the world's biggest companies have caused $28 trillion in climate damage, a new study estimates. That sounds bad, but reality is far worse. Numbers on a computer mean nothing on a soon-to-be-dead planet. From Scientific American, how climate change could trigger earthquakes. Never mind the ionosphere heater frequency transmitters that all available science makes clear when that microwave frequency is transmitted into a seismically sensitive region, it will cause seismic activity, period. But no mention of that, because the whole of academia, the whole of matrix media, owned by those who print the money. They dictate the narrative. They decide what's true and what's not, what's mentioned and what's omitted. From ARAtechnica.com, ghost forests are growing as sea levels rise, and yes, they are rising. And sea level rise is not uniform for those who don't know. Seafloor topography is part of the equation. There are other factors as well. But those who deny it's happening have not done any research whatsoever. You can see trees in the surf line on islands in the South Seas and elsewhere. They're rising, and it's going to increase rapidly from here. From theconversation.com, listen to this. This makes me want to leave to another planet if I could. Sniping koalas from helicopters. Here's what's wrong with Victoria's unprecedented cull. Snipers in helicopters have shot more than 700 koalas in Western Victoria in recent weeks. It's believed to be the first time koalas have been culled in this way. The Victorian government must explain why it's undertaking aerial culling and why it did so without announcing it publicly. Of course they wouldn't announce it. Shooting koala bears from helicopters in forests that they want to log, because that's ultimately what's behind all this. Something seriously wrong with the vast majority of the human race. One, that people can do this, and two, that the vast majority can do nothing to stop it. From the New York Times, Trump opens a huge marine protected zone to commercial fishing. What a great idea, Mr. Trump. Let's just strip out anything left alive until nothing is left. I spent so many hours under the surface of the sea over so many years of my life. Certified from age 14, a dive master for many years. I had the pleasure of taking some kids that I worked with in the Big Brother program that I was involved with for a time, taking them under the surface of the sea and showing them what was there. And when they surfaced, they couldn't stop talking about what they had seen for hours, literally. And what a joy it was to share that with a young man that would have otherwise never had the chance to see this undersea world. And now it's almost all obliterated, and what's left is about to be wiped out by opening it up to commercial fishing destruction. Thank you to the current administration, and they're not in charge of anything ultimately anyway. They're puppets on the end of strings. Those who print the money are in control from behind the curtain. That's how the system works. And the even more distressing part is that those in power couldn't do what they do without the active or passive participation of the majority population. There's more on the Trash the Oceans theme from hatchmag.com. Federal judge hits the brakes on Trump's plan to fast-track industrial fish farming. Advocates for marine health say aquaculture has no place in U.S. ocean waters. Let's talk about the record-warm Gulf of Mexico that's already a massive dead zone. Dead zones as big as 10,000 square miles. Nothing that lived there before lives there now, and we're going to grow fish farms there when fish farms are dying in much colder parts of the world's oceans anyway. From Chile and Patagonia to Norway and other regions, they're dying, literally tens of thousands of tons dying. And they think they're just going to fish farm in the record warm and massive dead zone of the Gulf of Mexico. It's moronic. There's no sanity in this equation anywhere. And too many people don't want to know. They want to be told everything will work out fine. Just keep your head down, do your job, do what you're told, and we'll all live happily ever after. Good luck with that. Let's add to the dead zone theme on the oceans from KTLA News in Southern California. Quote, thousands of marine mammals sick and dying along Southern California coast. And that's just what was left. Now there's almost nothing left. I spent so many years diving with seals in solitude alone at the Channel Islands. And now they're all washing up dead on beaches. And so many people would rather watch a football game than try to help save what's left of the planet. From the UK Guardian, more than 80% of the world's reefs hit by bleaching after worst global event on record. Done. Reefs are done. Kelp forests are done. Oceans are hurtling toward Canfield Ocean. Lifeless, stratified, dead zones. Oceans die, we die. Simple. So, am I concluding that the human race will soon be no more? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Short of a complete course correction, extremely near-term planetary omnicide is our mathematically certain, extremely near-term destination. Can we alter our course? Is there still time to make a difference? There's only one way to find out, but the effort will require far more participants because currently far too many are content with complacency, with non-stop scripted political theater, with endless bread and circus, mass distraction, personal pursuits of pleasure and entertainment. Yes, I'm fully aware that no one wants to hear that message. I'm fully aware of how angry that kind of message makes many. Thus the proverb, kill the messenger. That consequence of telling the truth, how many choose to react to it, isn't in my control. Choosing to say what needs to be said is, and I'll continue to man my appointed post until I am no longer standing. Count on it. What is the core objective of the controllers in regard to the programmed perspectives of populations? The following is some timeless input from Hannah Arendt. The aim of totalitarian education has never been to install convictions, but to destroy the capacity to form any. Education is the point at which we decide whether we love the world enough to assume responsibility for it. That means being good stewards of it, by the way. And by the same token, save it from that ruin which, except for renewal, except for the coming of the new and the young, would be inevitable. And education, too, is where we decide whether we love our children enough not to expel them from our world, thus leaving them to their own devices, nor to strike from their hands their choice of undertaking something new, something unforeseen by us. But rather, our task is to prepare them in advance for the task of renewing a common world. Again, Hannah Arendt. Question, what kind of example to our children has the vast majority been so far on a planet that's dying by the day? A final timeless insight from Hannah Arendt. When all are guilty, no one is. Confessions of collective guilt are the best possible safeguard against the discovery of culprits and the very magnitude of the crime, the best excuse for doing nothing. How many choose to do exactly nothing? Because they have long since convinced themselves that there is nothing they can do in the face of such monumental challenges and threats. That lie must be shattered and obliterated if we collectively stood together against the gathering storm, against the rising sea of insanity, against the criminal cancer of control that is on the cusp of destroying the world, literally, and so far, again, with the active or passive support of the majority population. If we truly stood together, standing solidly on facts, reason, reality, and with unshakable resolve, we could yet make a difference, even at this late hour. Reprioritize, take a stand, make your voice heard. Don't yield to the resistance of the willfully blind and morally challenged. Never give up, ever. This is in our power. Such an act of God-given will can't be taken from us. Fully exposing and halting the ongoing weather, chemical, and biological warfare taking place in our skies is the first and most important leap we can collectively make in the right direction. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific instructions on how you can help to move this fight forward. Please make your voice heard. Make every single day count. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.